Hey guys, so let's talk about posing today. I did a little Q&A with some of my current clients and non-clients on my posing page, and so let's go through some of the questions that people have for me about posing and all of the related fun stuff with it. So the first question I got was, how do I get better at my side poses? I cannot get my back to turn. So I looked at your profile, you're a wellness girly. Your poses are sisters, not twins. That I think is one of the most important things. And I'll actually stop this in a second and stand up over there in my posing area and show you. What you want to think about is you need to do stretches that will rotate your upper body separate from your lower. So if you think about like grabbing on a wall, and then I'll show you one here right now, that will help a lot with being able to get that rotation. So one stretch that really helps some of my girls is, so you're gonna have a wall behind you. Let me get closer. And you're gonna stand facing away from the wall, and you're going to rotate your body like so, and just hold this stretch. You're gonna feel it really deep in your mid and upper back. Do it both directions. And just focus on trying to keep your hips forward and letting your chest come around. Okay, so the big thing is what you wanna be able to do is twist that upper body, that chest, separately from the lower. Few things with the side poses specifically for wellness that I see girls do that make it harder. If you are bent over in this pose, it's gonna be really hard to get that upper body around. So in wellness, you don't need to think as upright as bikini always, but you need to be more upright than bent over, because then you're trying to go like this, and that's why your arm's sticking out a lot of times in the wellness poses. So you wanna think be upright and then twist that chest around, and you don't need to be fully facing forward in wellness, okay? We don't wanna think to square the shoulders up. You wanna think just open up enough so that that arm isn't covering that glute and it can be relaxed. So try those stretches, and just keep in mind, you don't need to be perfectly square to the front with your shoulders doing a wellness side pose. So the next question I got here is the biggest mistake I see first time competitors do. So really good question here. What I would say is being afraid when you're in comparisons of fixing your poses. So inevitably at some point in your competitive career, you're going to get into a pose a little funky when you're going from, you know, either front to back, back to front, or if you're in wellness, one of your quarter turns. Do not be afraid if you feel something go off to fix your pose. I think that is the biggest thing that people fail to do. If you hit your pose incorrectly and hold it there, the judges think that is what your pose is supposed to look like. So understanding that you're inevitably going to do something wrong, don't be afraid to take a second and refix your pose. Obviously, you don't want to be fixing your pose every 2 seconds. That's a lot of times why you see people talk about the window crank arm. Don't be constantly adjusting the pose, but don't be afraid that if you feel you get into it wrong, to fix it. Take an extra second, still keep your posture nice and tall when you do this, and still keep your face and your confidence on point, but don't be afraid to fix your pose. If you hit it wrong, just get to it and fix it. I think that's the biggest thing that first time competitors may forget or not think about or be too afraid to do on stage. So our next question here just said, posing stage routine, I don't know how to pose. So let's talk about it. And I'll give examples of each of the divisions here in a second. So for bikini and fit model, your stage routine is going to consist of your front pose, hitting your back pose, and back to your front. The main difference between these two divisions is the transitions. So in bikini, you're going to have set transitions and you're going to briefly hold them. For fit model, yes, you have to hit transitions to move, but you do not hold them. So I'll show a little example here in a second and go into that. Wellness is different. So wellness, you have 4 poses you need to know for comparisons. A wellness routine, you can pick which ones you want to show. So a lot of girls, if they don't have a ton of time to work on their posing, or maybe they're not comfortable with it yet, they may choose to do their standard quarter turns as their routine. But the fun thing with wellness is you can choose to just do 3 of your poses if you want. So if you just want to hit your front pose, your favorite side pose, and your back pose, you can combine them in some way and do that just fine. Okay, so let's go over some examples of some stage routines. So let's go over a basic bikini stage posing routine, okay? So for bikini, we're going to come into our front pose. You're going to hit your first transition called an S pose or a model pose. You're going to hit the booty pop. You're going to come to your back pose. You're going to do some variation of stepping out of that pose, turning back to the front, hitting another transition, and then coming back into your front pose. Okay, so putting that together, just a little example. So let's talk fit model. Obviously the division is evolving as we go, so I'll use what I'm doing for a routine as a simple example. So we're going to start in that fit model front pose. You're going to transition to get your weight off of that slanted position. You're going to turn to the back without stopping, hit your back pose, then you're going to transition out of your back pose back to the front without stopping. Okay, so a little bit quicker than bikini, obviously different poses required, so something like this. And lastly, we have wellness. So wellness, you have a very, very wide variety of pieces and parts of your routine you can do, but I'm just gonna show a simple 3-pose routine, something that I'm comfortable with that's nice and easy. So we'll start in that wellness front pose. Hit our favorite side pose, for me that's my left. Hit a transition, a booty pop, back pose, and then coming out of this, back into the front pose. Okay, so did a little bit of a fancy turn there. I stepped back with a different leg than I probably would have recommended, but something like this. Next up on questions here, we have, do I need a posing coach and when should I start posing? So let's answer this straight up. Majority of the time, yes, you should have a posing coach. I will say the biggest issue is, especially in bikini, a lot of the material that's available online for free is outdated. You need someone who is up to date with, as the division evolves, the posing will slightly change and what is being rewarded versus not will adjust over time. You know, back in 2020 in bikini, we used to do a big lat flare. That's no longer a thing. So having someone who's up to date with it and that can evaluate your physique is really helpful. What I see a lot of girls struggle with is they'll have their favorite pro and they love their routine and they'll try to copy it. The big thing is that person's routine, beautiful and all, their physique is likely different than yours. They're likely a different height, different muscle insertions, a different amount of muscularity and density. So what would best suit your physique is likely going to be different than them. So having someone that can adjust your poses and actually change things to make your physique look best to the division that you're competing in is super, super helpful. It also just gives you an extra amount of accountability and gives you that guidance so that you don't have that stress of trying to learn the posing and being worried about if you're doing it correctly. And with that, when should I start posing? As everyone always says, as soon as you decide you're going to compete. Why is that though? So 1, buy your heels first thing. Getting used to the heels is going to be your biggest asset. For a lot of people, if you are not a regular heel wearer, getting used to walking in heels, the balance, and the little bit of discomfort is going to be extremely beneficial, okay? It's going to make it so that as you're learning, adjusting your balance through your poses, that you are far more comfortable and confident in doing so, all right? The next thing, starting early, starting when you're in an off season or as soon as you want to compete. What it's going to do is it's going to alleviate the stress of when you're in prep of trying to learn how to pose. If you get a few weeks out and you know that you don't know what you're doing, it is extremely stressful. So do yourself a favor and remove that bit of stress from your prep that you can so that it will help your body as you get into those last few weeks. Secondly, in prep, you might not be at your best mentally, especially your first contest preparation. So preparing for that and learning how to pose and going through the difficult thing of trying to learn this really weird skill while you still have food and energy in your body when you're not doing a ton of cardio is going to be really, really beneficial. It's going to help it stick better and you learn faster than you would when you're in a depleted state. And lastly, with that, the cost. A lot of people know bodybuilding is expensive. However, a lot of the costs come close to your show. So you're probably gonna have to pay for your show registration, your tan, the hotel, things like that. Those are gonna be costs that you're going to pay for closer to the show. So if you're trying to do all of your learning of your posing really close, it's going to add that financial, you know, that big push there, versus if you start early and spread it out, it's gonna remove that. It also may require less sessions because you're not gonna be as stressed and you're going to retain it better. So I always tell girls it's far more beneficial to start earlier than later because you're removing that stress. You're gonna probably be able to get away with doing less sessions because you're going to retain that information better, and it just makes the process so much easier. All right, our next question is a fun one. Posing in socks. This is my biggest pet peeve. By far. I may say other things are, but posing in socks is by far my biggest pet peeve as a coach. The biggest thing that a lot of people don't realize with it is when you pose in socks, you're going to stretch out the plastic on your shoe. And when you diet for a show, you lose body fat everywhere. And what you may not realize is there is some body fat in the pads of your feet. So imagine that for months, you're wearing socks in these shoes, you're stretching out the plastic, and at that same time, your feet are getting smaller. So that when you go to wear these shoes on stage for possibly the first time without socks, and your feet are smaller, your shoes are now bigger than when you bought them, and your feet are smaller, and you've never practiced in them without socks. It is a recipe for disaster, okay? Practice how you perform. Just gonna leave it at that. Practice how you perform. Practicing in socks, yeah, it might be a little more comfortable. Yeah, it might be easier. Take them off. It takes an extra 2 seconds. It'll get you used to the feel of the plastic on your feet so that when you go to stage time, you're ready. I'm also a big advocate. I don't think you should need to buy new shoes all the time. And by constantly wearing socks in them, you're going to stretch them out or break them so that they don't adequately fit your feet so by the time that you get to stage. So save yourself a little money, save yourself some hassle, and keep your shoes fitting how they should for longer. And a question here, walking out and moving on stage for comparisons. I was considering recording out there for this, but it's a bit long. I go over this with my girls. Best words of advice here. Stay nice and tall, stay confident. Watch videos of competitions to see how it goes. Depending on your show, things may change. You need to practice walking on from both back corners of the stage just to get you prepared of what that will feel like, so that you know what it feels like starting your walk from each side, getting into the box from each side. Practice holding your pose on the side walls and then holding your pose, okay? For comparisons, just a little arm raise or whatever when they call your number works adequately. If you forget your number, you can look down. If you completely blank out and forget to look down or look at your number, there will be an expediter or a person on stage that will help you out. Do not worry, you will not get marked down for not remembering your number or not coming out. I promise you, it happens. There are women on stage that may not speak English, so they understand. They're there to help you. Just practice moving around, watch shows. One thing I tell my girls a lot of times to go through comparison practice on their own and not just on sessions with me. Find a video of a show, listen to it, find someone's number in one of the call outs. Imagine you're there, listen to it again and imagine you're their number and go through the movements that they make that person go through. So if they tell them turn front to back, do that. If they make them move with someone else, practice that as well. It's a really good way to understand how long a prejudging comparison lineup is, and so that you get your body used to holding your poses for that long. And for our last question, what is my favorite division to pose and why? Well, people may not expect this, but wellness is by far my favorite division to pose. I don't know why, but I think it's so much fun. The wellness division, you get a little more leniency because you don't just have 2 poses. You have any of the 4 sides and any combination you like, and you can get away with a little more freedom in wellness, I feel like. As long as it's not too much over the top and you don't want to be overtly like too sexy or anything of that sort, you can have so much fun with it. I just think it's so beautiful, the options you have, and you can add in a little bit of fun footwork here and there. So I love, love, love wellness. I also think a lot of times getting a wellness girl into her proper poses for the first time to show that level of muscularity and density is super, super rewarding, because I think a lot of times people may sell themselves short on their physique and wellness if they're not adequately posed. So I just love posing wellness. It's one of those things. I don't have legs, so I guess I look at them and I'm like imagining. It's also, it's so fun. So I love posing wellness. I do pose a lot of bikini, and I'm starting to get into more fit model as well. And I think as fit model develops, I'll find a little bit more of that in it. But bikini, just being front and back, and you know, it's pretty straightforward. We know what the division wants and requires. You don't have as much of that creative leniency, especially at the amateur level, in bikini as you do in wellness. So alrighty, you guys, that is all for my little posing Q&A for you guys. If you have any other questions, leave me a comment. I am super open about it. Certain things I may keep secret because that's what people pay me for, but just let me know if there's anything. I may do another one of these down the road, but I just thought that would be a fun little thing to share with you all when people had questions. So let's get after it and have a good weekend, you guys.